everybody, and welcome to our webinar on Indigenizing Research in Academia, Lessons from the Field. My name is Tanisha Moses. I am Upper Tanana Athabascan, originally from North Bay, Alaska. I'll be your moderator for today's discussion. Today we have a distinguished panel of Indigenous social work scholars who will be sharing their experiences and insights into indigenizing and decolonizing research. I'd like to acknowledge the Lower Tanana Dene people who have been the stewards of these lands for over 10,000 years. I reside in Fairbanks, working on the Tracheta campus, which has historically served as a gathering place for surrounding tribes. As we gather on Zoom, from all over Alaska and beyond, I invite you to think about the traditional lands you reside on and what the land offers us. I'd also invite you to share your favorite springtime activities on the land, and I created a test poll to see if that works. So feel free to add on there. Before I begin, I would like to start this webinar with gratitude. All of this is possible thanks to the UAA MSW program, especially for my advisor and professor, Dr. Vanessa Mead. Hi. Dr. Mead has supported my journey from the beginning of my graduate program. She has always encouraged me to dream big and has validated my experiences as an emerging Indigenous scholar to bring my life experiences and integrate the cultural knowledge that has been passed down to me into my work. With support from the UAA program, I was able to create a practicum around Indigenous research, so I also want to express my gratitude to my practicum supervisor, Dr. Jessica Black. Dr. Black is the Associate Vice Chancellor for CRCD and wears many other hats, but also has taken the time this year to mentor me on top of everything else she is doing. Through the experience of working with Indigenous scholars, I have found hope and a path for myself. With this panel, I wanted to demystify what research is and share with you insights from those who have already been paving the path to indigenizing and decolonizing research. With that said, I would like to now welcome and introduce you to our panelists, Dr. Jessica Black. Dr. Black is a powerhouse when it comes to advocating for Indigenous initiatives. Her scholarly pursuits revolve around the intricate relationship between governance and well-being among Alaska Native peoples. Dr. Laverne Haleg-Dementive. Dr. Dementive is a beacon of light in the realm of trauma-informed care and wellness. She brings her wisdom from her elders everywhere she goes. Dr. Jordan Lewis. Dr. Lewis is an accomplished researcher whose work sheds light on cultural specific approaches to Alaska Native successful aging and the integration of culture into elder care. Dr. Jessica Saniguk Ulrich. Dr. Ulrich's passion for promoting connectedness, well-being, and relational healing shines through her work. I was so happy to hear her excitement for this panel as an alum and for the UAA MSW program, where she also taught for several years. Each one of our panelists brings a unique perspective and wealth of experience to this conversation. This webinar aims to shed light on Indigenous scholars' experiences and inspire and encourage future generations of social work students and researchers. We hope that by the end of our session, you'll have gained valuable insights and perspectives on indigenizing research. Without further ado, let's dive into our discussion. So, I'd like to start by inviting each of our panelists to introduce themselves and provide a brief opening statement reflecting on their personal journeys into the social work profession, academia, and research. Dr. Black, would you like to start?
Sure. During Gwinzi, everyone. Shojri Jessica Blackoji, Gwichaje, Gwatsan Ithli, Gatanan Gwichi. Good afternoon, everyone. In my Gwichan language, I said, how are you? My name is Jessica Black. My family is from Gwichaje, Fort Yukon, Alaska, but I also grew up in Tagatili, Nenana, Alaska, on Lower Tanana Dene lands, and I now live in Tanun, Fairbanks, also on Lower Tanana Dene lands, and very grateful for their past, present, and future stewardship. I am from Gwichaje, Fort Yukon, and I grew up with a large extended family like many of our Indigenous peoples do. most significant in just growing up were with being with my grandparents, being raised with them on the Yukon River at fish camp. And that was such a amazing upbringing. It's where I really became a person in this world, became aware. And at the time growing up, it was a lot of hard work. And there were times I wanted to go to town, but we stayed out there all summer. But looking back, I'm so grateful for those experiences because they've really helped to shape my life. My grandparents have both passed, Sarah and Isaac John, Gutchaje, Gutsan, Hisha. They are from Fort Yukon. And my parents are the late Bill Black and Marlene DeRochers of Kansas City and Fort Yukon. And I have a little daughter, Aurora Lee, and she is from Fort Yukon and also Vajrek, Fort Yukon, Arctic Village, Alaska. And my partner is Danny Lee. And I work at UAF. I am the Associate Vice Chancellor for the College of Rural and Community Development. But I just wanted to touch on a few points that Tanisha asked us to share, and that, our worldview, who we are, like what brings us into social work and our personal journey. And I think it was my grandparents. They were very giving people, not a lot of monetary resources, but a big hearts. I remember distinctly, we would get back from fish camp after being there all summer long, and my grandpa would take a wheelbarrow and he would bring all the best fish to elders in town and to like widows and people without the means to fish. And I asked him one time, because I was walking with him, and I said, why do you give them like all the best fish? And he's like, that's what we do. That's like how we share. And so that giving back and living our values, I think, is very important to my family. My grandpa also started a Christmas to New Year's potlatch in Fort Yukon. So that's the coldest time of year. It can be like 60 degrees below zero. And he wanted people to get together and not be lonely. So he applied for a potlatch moose. And if he was blessed, he would cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner from Christmas Day to New Year's Day, and I would help him in the kitchen washing dishes, washing the table. Our whole family did, and my great uncles, and pretty soon it was just the whole community. So really giving back, living our values, those are really important to me growing up. And I think when I came into social work, I took a 100 level class, and reading those values and helping, we had like a volunteer service we had to do. It just really aligned with who I was as a person. It felt right. That's the only way I could say it. I felt like I found my home. And so I took the one other class, a policy class, and that's where I really found my passion. Thinking back on that, I was in that class with Jordan, or Jordan, you were like 1 year ahead of me or 2 years, but it was like studying subsistence 30 years ago or 20 years ago, and we're still dealing with some of the same issues, but putting our heart into changing these issues to be more reflective of who our people are, which are like respectful, loving, giving people. And so making a difference was really important to me. And I could tell as a Native person, because I worked at Fairbanks Resource Agency and Office of Family and Children Services, which was called DFYS at the time. But as a Native person, when Native people who are often overrepresented in these systems would walk in the room and see me, their whole vibe would change. It was just almost like a sign of relief when they saw me. And so I felt like I could help advocate for them and also help them understand things in a way that was reflective of our cultures. So I would just say, that's what brought me into social work. I found my home more in the macro practice arena, working to change policy and really, decolonize these systems, which is a big word for help society recognize that a lot of our systems are built on these colonial legacies and structures, and they don't serve our people, and sometimes they can actually harm our people. So like decolonizing work and really bringing our Indigenous values into these spaces is a good thing, and it's good for everyone. So I don't want to take up too much time because we have a lot of folks, and I want to make sure everybody has ample time, but those are some of the reflections I want to share. And I just want to thank everybody that's attending for making time on a Monday evening. And I want to thank my fellow panelists for joining. And I wanted to tell Tanisha she's done an amazing job and I'm really proud of the work she's doing. So Masicho, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Black. I also want to say that I enabled chat, so if you'd like to use the chat, and I shared the poll. I really appreciate the way that you kind of started us all off, and it's just really important to start us off that way. Next up, Dr. Laverne Dementif, would you like to go next and share your opening statement and personal journey into the social work profession, academia, and research?
Yeah, Doka Den. So excited, so grateful. Shukadistan, I'm so grateful to be here with all my friends and sharing this important information. I'll start with introductions. I'll just say Adaya Khuds, which means hello, everyone. My name is Haleg Saezra, or Laverne Dementa. Deloitte Chat Katrina Chag Yeh Hastat. My family comes from Holy Cross in Anvik, Alaska. Sadith Nakai, Rudy and Alice Dementif, Yeh Haba Ezret. My parents are the late Rudy and Alice Dementif. I have one son, Sekongane, which means protector, my protector, Kyrie Harris. I grew up in Togatili, Niniana, and Kaichoch, and that's Anchorage, so big village, Kaichoch is what that means. Kaichoch, kids visto. I live in Fairbanks. UAF Troth Yada Natin Kostanech social work Oho. So I work at UAF on the Troth Yada campus and in the social work program. I'm a professor and I've been here since 2006. So I would also say which means it's just really good to be here with all of you. Yes, when I think of how I entered the profession of social work, or even just, in academia, I think that much like Jessica said, I had role models in my family and elders and people that guided me and along the way. And my elder sister, Darlene Dementa, when I was a teenager, she was entering the social work program at UAF. And of course, her being my older sister, just wanted to, thought that was interesting. And she was doing really good work in the community. And just want to honor her and the rest of my family. We grew up in Nenana till I was about 10, and then we moved to Anchorage and to be closer to the hospital because my mother was ill. And just so many people, I think back to the support that I was given by teachers and people in my life that just pulled me along. Especially, I have a trauma history and, of course, a resilience history. And sometimes that trauma history has really created challenges and stuckness. And I think that I literally can look back into my history and pinpoint the organizations that lifted me up and the people in those organizations and my family members and friends and community and elders, so that I could work on my healing and growth. And so I think a lot about our elders, and I'm just want to give gratitude to them and honor our ancestors that worked so tirelessly to bring forward our language and our culture so that someone like me in 2024 benefit from that. It's such a blessing, and I'm so grateful every day. And I just think about the the love they had for our way of life, and how they understood the importance of our way of life um, to our healing and to our well-being, and knew, even amidst so much change and challenge, and when things were being um, stolen and taken, that they knew these things had to go forward, because that was our wellness, and that was going to be our future. And so I'm just grateful. I'm so grateful that today I can share my introduction with you all in my language, and I'm learning my language, and I'm also teaching my language. And so I guess I'll stop there, but I just want to give gratitude to the elders, and just recognize that so much of who I am is because of the strength of my ancestors and what they went through, and what they've given me. So don't get in.
Thank you, Laverne. Dr. Jordan Lewis, would you like to go next?
Sure, thank you. And it's an honor to be here. And so, Ong, hello, hello. I'm Jordan Lewis. My mom's side of the family are from Naknek. We're Aleut, the Bristol Bay region, and my dad's side of the family are from Portland, Oregon. Currently, I am the Associate Director of Memory Keepers Medical Discovery Team, which is a fairly new research center at the University of Minnesota Medical School. Never imagined myself as a social worker working in a medical field for the past 8 years, but here I am. But I'm also really excited to share that this is a wonderful way to start my journey home back to Alaska. So I'll be returning to UAF this June, which is really exciting. So I'm really excited to be part of this as like moving back in a good way. I think it's a wonderful, and to see wonderful colleagues, and we were classmates a while ago. But yeah, I grew up with my elders. I think about my journey into social work, like Jessica and Laverne have talked about, it really comes from the values we were instilled in when we were growing up. My parents had a big impact on us, being involved in your community, helping elders when they need help, just being available, visiting with people. I find myself reflecting a lot on the way things used to be when I was growing up, and how you didn't call ahead and schedule a visit to go see someone. You just went over and they would make time. You just go and visit, have tea, and things would stop, and you'd be there for 3 or 4 hours laughing and having a good time. And how that really has, I think, shaped not only who I am, but why I do what I do. And I think about what some of this current generation is missing because they didn't have that, or there aren't those opportunities. And so my family were big supporters of higher education in some way. And so, I grew up, had a lot of medical problems growing up. And so I was in the healthcare system at OHSU in Portland until I was 18. And I always thought to myself, I'm going to be a doctor. I'm going to be a physical therapist. These people have done so much for me. I want to give back. And so started college. I was like, this is it. I'm going to go into the medical field. And I took, some math classes and realized that's not my strength. Nor was working with cadavers. And so I realized, well, this is definitely not my calling. But like Jessica said, I took this intro to social work, intro to sociology class, and it clicked, because I always knew, some part of me knew I wanted to work with people in some capacity and give back and help people, I think, find that resilient factor they have in each of themselves, that they can overcome obstacles with supports. And so that changed everything. I dropped all my science classes and became a social work major. And so, growing up on the Oregon coast most of my life in the winters and then fishing in the summers, I had this strong desire to know more about who I was as an Alaska Native person. And that's my junior year, I moved to UAF. Went against everyone's in my family. I quit commercial fishing. I was going to go out on my own. I was going to do everything myself. When you're 21, you think you know everything. And just moved up myself. First time I'd ever been to Fairbanks, and just I had an aunt and uncle there, but met 2 wonderful people and several more wonderful people who are attending tonight, who've become lifelong friends, and those supports along the way that have enabled me to be where I am today. and it's been a wonderful journey. And so in my social work journey, I tried a variety of different things. I was actually an ICWA case manager with TCC in my junior year to make sure I really wanted to work with older adults, but I had to test other areas of social work just to make sure. So I did that. I did, home visits for adoption placements, did some family therapy stuff just to make sure. And then I did my MSW in St. Louis. Again, tested the waters in other areas of social work just to make sure. And in my cohort back then, I was one of 3 that were actually in the gerontology curriculum or concentration. And so got asked that question, 22 years old from Alaska, why work with elders? Why not work with young kids? Why not work with families? Older people they're boring. They're not as fun to be around. And so, the 3 of us would try to convince everyone else that they were wrong. But I think, again, reflecting back on, I was raised with this idea that growing older was something you look forward to. It's something that's a status that's revered by other people that see something in you that, a lot of the elders we work with, are very humble and say, well, I'm not an elder yet. But how do we change that mindset that growing older is a gift, and not everyone gets to have that gift, but we have so much to look forward to as we grow older. And so I think that's kind of how I got into social work. Similar to Jessica, I'm very macro oriented. I really work with communities to find ways to support elders to age in place. But within the field of aging, I tried the clinical part. I worked in, I think Sarah McConnell, who I think is on here, may remember John Waters at the Denali Center in Fairbanks was my first practicum supervisor. And he really introduced me to the field of social work in a nursing home setting. And I think that's one area of work that I'm very passionate about. But yeah, so I feel the field of social work definitely has, a lot of skills, and it's very marketable, but also as a place for people who care about other people and have those values instilled in them, that not only do you get to work with the population and work with people to see the best of themselves, but you're also colleagues with wonderful people who have the same values and have those same characteristics and passions that you have, that going to work every day is a lot of fun. So that's kind of how I got to where I am today. And then being in a medical setting, definitely challenging because my colleagues don't see the world that way. So I see myself as teaching our future doctors to think like a social worker and really see that they're more than just a disease, but there's a person there also.
Great answer. I really appreciate your background and everything that you kind of are bringing to this panel. We also have Dr. Jessica Saniguk Ulrich. Did I say your name right?
Yes, thank you. And thanks so much for the invitation to be part of this panel, and so great to see so many familiar attendees. So good to see you all. Wanga Jessica Saniguk Ulrich and Savaktunga Washington State University in Spokane. And my family's originally from the native village of Wales, Kingigan in our language, and my great-grandparents and my grandmother moved from Wales to Nome when my grandmother was a teenager. So I'm a tribal citizen of Nome Eskimo community, and I am temporarily living in Spokane while my partner goes to law school, and I'll be moving back to Alaska, hopefully May time of next year. And I have 2 wonderful teenage daughters. They're the light of my life. They've taught me so much, and I share a lot of what they've taught me in various presentations. But a little bit about my personal journey. I actually got my undergrad degree in psychology and philosophy at Gonzaga University. And as I was, approaching my senior year and everything, I remember going, what am I going to do with this? Like, what? But I was also doing a federal work study for the Child Protection Agency there, and was a visitation supervisor. And I was seeing on the front lines, like, how hard this system was on children and families. And around that same time, there was an article coming out. I, kept reading the Anchorage Daily News to keep tabs on what's happening in Alaska. I was very homesick. But there were articles that came out about the disproportionate number of Alaska Native children in out-of-home care in Alaska. And around that same time, I took like some career test, personality test, and it was saying I should be a social worker. And everyone was telling me, oh, you'd be a natural social worker. You should do social work. I was like, I wish they had that that, degree program here, but they didn't. So I decided to go ahead and apply for the MSW program at UAA. I wanted to go home. I wanted to be back in Alaska and engage in social work and do that in my community of my home state. And so I got in and I went straight from my undergrad to my MSW program over 20 years ago now. It's amazing how time flies, but I loved that program. I love social work. I love the values. I love feeling like we're part of something bigger than ourselves. And the macro, micro, meso, and person and environment, and just, strength, space, perspective, all those things, they just really aligned with what I felt was right. And so I did my practicum at Chugach and at the Office of Children's Services. They had just changed their name from DFYS to OCS back then, and started working in child welfare after I got my degree, and was in child welfare for 8.5 years in various positions. And that was the hardest job. And I have a lot of respect for people that go into that line of work. But I also was inspired by another Indigenous scholar from Canada, Cindy Blackstock. And I knew once I heard her research she was doing in Canada on within child welfare, I was like, oh, I want to do that, because I saw it all in terms of the things that were happening within the system, the compounded trauma of child removal, feeling like no matter what we did, it felt like, there were repercussions, to every decision, and feeling like we're not just affecting a parent and a child, we're affecting their whole family and the community. And it felt like people weren't understanding that dynamic. So I wanted to do research to kind of shed light on another way of approaching the practice, and thinking of policy and all of these dynamics that create a system, and figure out how we could do it different and better, because I was not wanting to see any more children go through what they were going through. So that's why I became a researcher, and I'm excited to engage in some research discussion. But good to see you all. Koyana.
Thank you, Dr. Ulrich, for sharing your opening statements and insights. And kind of what you're talking about is related to our next topic. So now we will move on to our main discussion. Our first topic of conversation comes from the book Research's Ceremony, which discusses how Indigenous scholars can separate their own Indigenous lives from their academic endeavors, and how to have their work considered in scholarly academic realms. They strove to be Western researchers of the highest caliber. So for this first round, we're going to discuss how your worldview is reflected in your research. So Dr. Ulrich, I'd like to come back to you. And I just want to ask, what challenges arise when incorporating Indigenous knowledge, and how can these be addressed?
Yes, so I went to grad school to get my PhD at University of Washington, which is very top-notch research institution, and they were set to really give me those Western-based research skills. And I was like, no, you're not. You're not going to make me a Western researcher. I'm Indigenous. So I was bucking that the whole way. And it was very challenging. And I felt like I was constantly, raising my hand, asking the hard questions, trying to bring in more of that holistic worldview that doesn't just focus on individuals, or tries to, compartmentalize everything, you know, and so I was constantly bringing those questions up. I was in stats classes and going, where are the native people in these population, you know, samples and stuff. And so I was always bringing that up, and it was very hard and challenging. But I did find my allies, and my allies, some of my biggest teachers and mentors were, of course, Indigenous. Within the school social work there, they had an Indigenous Wellness Research Institute. Jordan was my initial mentor, and then I had Indigenous scholars who were in cohorts ahead of me that tucked me under their wing. And if it weren't for them, I would have been out of the program my first year. It was so hard to make that transition, a good paying job to like poverty level, you know, student income for a family. I had kids, you know, and a partner and everything, and a big move. And it was, that part was hard. And I kind of wish I would have found a different PhD program within Alaska, so I didn't have to uproot us like that. But got through it, and I'm grateful for the skills I got. And I did constantly, like any assignment that I was given, I was making it an Indigenous, you know, product. Like, here's an Indigenous policy that I'm focusing on. Here's a tribal lens. Here's, you know, I'm doing all of this research on all of these Indigenous scholars, Linda Tahiwe Smith and Cindy Blackstock, Sean Wilson, Margaret Kovach, Priscilla Day, you know, I could go on and on. I was focusing on learning that and centering it in my education, even though it wasn't centered in the program itself. There were pockets of it, and I appreciate those pockets, but it wasn't the whole program. So I made it mine. You know, that education was my responsibility in terms of what I, you know, pursued and sought out and made part of what I did within the academic program there.
Thank you, Dr. Ulrich. Now I'd like to ask Dr. Lewis, can you share a successful example of integrating Indigenous perspectives into mainstream frameworks?
Yes, that's a great question. I was just thinking about it earlier, and there are a few good examples out there, and I was thinking about, you know, depending on the popularity of the topic, right? And so I can speak from my experiences more grounded in health research, social work area, psychology. You know, there's some really excellent examples. More contemporary work coming out of UCLA around talking circles and drumming circles with sobriety and recovery. Dr. Daniel Dickerson, who's a Inupiat, has been kind of the forefront person in that area of research. And I think that's a really great example of, you know, he took him years and years and years to push the boundaries of abstinence only or harm reduction, and thinking about there are other ways that populations have been successful in helping Native people or other populations heal in their own way. And so that was the one example I think that has comes to mind. The other good example, I think, is right there at UAF. You know, the Center for Alaska Native Health Research has been doing phenomenal work around youth suicide prevention. The Kangazavik project, the toolbox they've developed. You know, the late Jerry Mohad has really been the leader in that area, and the team he's developed now under Dr. Stacy Rasmussen, her team, have done really excellent work taking from the ground up community-based research and really develop frameworks that now are being applied to other populations around the world. And so I think those are just some really good examples. I can see a lot of funders now, I think, as we push these boundaries with scholars like, you know, this panel here, where we're being persistent in our desire and our need and our passion for moving research to think beyond Western frameworks, this disease model. You know, when we start hearing, especially, you know, I hear it a lot around climate science. It has come up a couple of times in our dementia research here that, you know, Indigenous people have the answers. Why aren't we listening to them more frequently? Now we're hearing that around, you know, not health related, but burn science, where you're controlled burns. Native people have been doing that for centuries. And now people at the state level, they're realizing, oh, we should ask them what we should be doing when these summer fires are getting out of control. And so there's there's a movement, I think, as this past year, I think we've seen Native representation everywhere across society. I think it's a really exciting time. And so those are just a few of the examples, I think, as we think about how do we stop always jumping to the assumption that Western frameworks are the answer. And when they don't work, we blame the population for not adhering to what we think is the model of what works in research. And we need to think about how do we adapt frameworks to meet the population, the culture you're working in, which is kind of the intervention work I'm starting. And so if you ever, word of advice is if you're thinking about making changes to mainstream frameworks, think about, do you really want to do intervention research? Because it's an undertaking that I'm excited to start that journey. But yeah, it definitely, there are some examples out there, and there are people who are leading that path that are more than happy to help you. So just remember, as you think about doing this, you don't have to do it alone.
Thank you. And I love that you brought up the research around like fires, because that brings us to my question for Dr. Dementive. How can non-Indigenous practitioners effectively integrate Indigenous knowledge while ensuring respect and cultural safety?
That's a good question, an important question. Thank you. The first thing that comes to mind is our intentions and our values. And I just, Jessica Black and I have been working with elders at Denakanaga around an elders mentoring elders camp, where elders are mentoring emerging elders and supporting them to be able to give back in their work. And one of the things that they really highlighted in this work was the importance of our values in guiding us in our actions. And so they wanted to have make sure there was values discussions being done. And I think a lot about that. And it kind of goes back to thinking about our intentions in the work that we're doing, and what intentions from our intentions kind of flow our actions. And so, thinking about our values, so many Indigenous researchers partake in or get their degrees, and their work is to better their community, to bring healing or wholeness, to support their community, to uplift voices, to uplift priorities of the community and of elders. And I think that one of the things that we can do and practice together is reflecting on what is it that what are our intentions and motivations in that. Decolonizing spaces and research is, for me, it's about being whole, right? Being able to show up as a whole human being in all of these spaces. Colonization disconnects us and compartmentalizes in silos, and wholeness is about healing and wellness. So in the work that we do, how do we help create that space? How do we help create wholeness within those spaces and healing and wellness? And so I think that is a good intention. I often talk about starting in a good way in almost every space that I'm in. And that's, again, wisdom of the elders, helping us recognize that when we come together to do something important or meaningful, that we are in Elizabeth Flegel, I've co-taught with her for many, many years, and she's always started in a good way. But it's that understanding that we are, every time we come to a space, we're coming with all of us, right? And sometimes that is our challenges and struggles and trauma or anxiety and things like that. And in order to engage in an important and meaningful way, right? How do we begin? How do we show up and be able to do the work? And one of the ways is just starting in a good way. And that's Elizabeth would often say a prayer, or she would sing a song, or she would read from her book. And And so many other elders do that. And I think that's those are lessons that we can, you know, that they've modeled for us that we can bring into all spaces that support how we engage well with others. So I also do presentations around healing-centered engagement. And that really is to support. I work with so many students that are going out there into organizations and working with people that are in crisis, and they're also sometimes having their own challenges. And I think that, you know, the more that we can create a community of care around within our organizations, within our work, with each other and our families, the better able that we're going to be. We're going to be better able to communicate, right? To collaborate, to be able to make hard decisions together, to come together and do the work that we need to do. And so the healing-centered engagement really is like, how do I want to experience this process? How do I want to show up? How do I want to feel in this? And then also thinking about, like, how do I want others to experience me in this process, right? And so that's an important part too. And just recognizing that all of our energy and all of our ways of being, both our strengths and our challenges, are a part of what we do every day. And so sometimes that we can learn strategies about how to support ourselves when we're having a bad day, or how when we're feeling particularly anxious or feeling particularly triggered, and then be able to notice that in others and have deep compassion for people. And so those are kind of things that are just coming to my mind around your question, Tanisha. Thank you.
Thank you. It's so important to be able to be whole and to think about our intentions and values. My next question is for Dr. Black. How does incorporating Indigenous knowledge systems enrich your research?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm just so enjoying listening to all of you and your reflections as well. It's just really awesome learning opportunity. I saw it was like on Instagram, and it was like a quote that said, "We're never done being educated," or "We're never done, you know, learning," something like that. And I was just like, yeah, that's so good. And I just feel like I'm learning a lot tonight. So thank you to each one of you. I think the first thing I think about when thinking about incorporating Indigenous knowledge, enriching research, is that the most important thing I can do is uplift Indigenous voices, because in, you know, the academy or in institutions of higher education, you know, a lot of times before, I feel like it's growing and it's changing. So I want to recognize that things are changing for the positive. But like when I was going to school, I was trying to think of who my first Indigenous professor was. I think it was Dr. Phyllis Fast in a anthropology course. And then I think that was like my first Indigenous teacher ever. And I grew up like in the village. So we had like teachers' aides and we had like migrant ed and things, but in college it was Dr. Phyllis Fast. And I just remember, you know, being really proud to learn from her. And I think about, you know, now we have more Indigenous representation, but in a lot of the things that I research, I'm really interested in the intersections of tribal governance and well-being, especially around cultural connection, you know, fish camp, things like fish camp, hunting, fishing, gathering, you know, our rights as Indigenous people. And like, who better to speak on that than people who have 10,000 plus years of experience? So often I am uplifting and like bringing into spaces Indigenous voices to speak for ourselves, you know, not have someone speak for us. And I don't always want to listen to myself, right? I'm like, we need our hunters, our fishermen, our gatherers, our, you know, our protectors, our people who raise children to speak to these issues and these beautiful strengths that we have. And so that's like one way. And I just you know, I really believe in that, is that we should be speaking for ourselves. And then every moment I can, I share about tribal sovereignty. So, you know, making sure people know that we have over 200 federally recognized tribes with inherent sovereignty, not given to us, but yes, recognized by the federal government, that we have sovereignty over our children, over, you know, people. Now, Alaska land claims made it a little more difficult with how our sovereign reach over lands and waters, but we've always showed up to the table, whether we're invited or not, to assert our sovereignty. And so I really try to incorporate that into research. And when I'm working with researchers who are like, oh, I study climate change, I want to go to, you know, this place and study climate change, I'm like, have you connected with the tribe? Have you connected with Quirk? Have you connected with, you know, Tanana Chiefs Conference? Like, who have you connected with about your research? And there are sovereign tribes and there are Native organizations who are doing this work. And then I think, like, I also encourage my students that come into UAF that they are not empty vessels that are waiting to be filled. They are coming in as leaders with inherent ancestral wisdom passed down for 10,000 years that is within them. And I think, you know, I know that they can bring that part of themselves, and they haven't always been able to do that. I will say that, like, I think if you asked each one of us, we're often the only one or one of like two in our classes. And so it's not always comfortable to share, especially if you're like Gwich'in and someone's asking me about like Inupiaq protocols or like ceremonies. I'm like, I can't speak, but I can connect you with someone who can maybe, you know, help you bring someone in to speak around these things. And so, you know, but I do encourage my students to share as much as they're comfortable with, because I don't want to push them to be the teacher of everyone. Two examples I wanted to share is that I have a project called Indigenizing Salmon Science and Management, and also one called Damumta. And I will share Damumta, which many of you online know about, but it is an NSF, National Science Foundation grant that supports 19 fellows who are getting their master's and PhD in fisheries or related STEM fields. And 17 are Indigenous, and they are fundamentally changing the landscape of UAF just by being present with all their ancestral wisdom and knowledge. And the work that they're doing is amazing in their communities. And so they're not only like working hand in hand with community and doing things in a reciprocal way, but they are just, their presence alone is, you know, making UAF a better place. And so I think about how I really try to use the skills I've gained. Sunny, I had a very similar experience in my education. It wasn't great. I mean, I felt like very disconnected. I got a lot of skills, but it was very hard. And so I think of like, how can I use my skills that I gathered and redistribute them to my people and communities if they're interested. I'm not trying to say I have all this knowledge. I want to be useful. I want to I like to live by these values that LaDonna Harris shared in her article, Indigeneity and Alternative Worldview, relationship, responsibility, reciprocity, and redistribution. So how can I use my skills to help, you know, live those values and, you know, be a positive something in the lives of those that I work with, and also like keep learning, right? Laverne mentioned elders mentoring elders. I feel like that's such a gift for me to work on that project because I'm really like the beneficiary of that. But how am I making sure with Laverne and Tanisha that the elders are being compensated for their time, as would a college professor? But for me, they're even like they're at the top for me as like far as like their knowledge. So that's how I really try to incorporate Indigenous knowledge into the research. I think if you bring our people, everything will get better. But like historically, we haven't always been welcomed into these spaces, and research, we haven't always been treated well. So I'm also mindful of those things as I move forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a good reminder of why like our experiences are important in our work. All of your reflections on your positionality as Indigenous scholars, they provide a valuable context for today's discussion. As an emerging Native scholar, I have started understanding the importance of positionality in research, how research is not always objective, and the value of our subjectivity. And I think the Devumta program is a really good example of how we can start to help students overcome those obstacles. But also by understanding our motivations and intentions and how our past experiences inform our future endeavors, we can ensure that our research is conducted ethically and culturally sensitive. I also want to acknowledge that, we didn't have Devumta, before. And so I want to acknowledge the challenges and obstacles Indigenous scholars face in academic research. And so that brings me to my next set of questions. And I'd like to ask Dr. Dementive, could you share some obstacles you've encountered in your academic journey and how you've overcome them?
Yes, thank you. I think the first thing that's coming up for me is even just seeing myself in the classroom or within the university system. I think I had 2 Indigenous teachers here at UAF who were so amazing to learn from, and where I resonated with what they were saying, and I saw myself, right? And that allowed me to see something bigger in myself, something that, when I shared in my presentations, many of those, or in both of those, within both of those courses with Indigenous faculty, I was able to share about my family and my community, and that was really powerful for me. I think that's one of the challenges that we're faced with, and we're still faced with today. I think about starting my PhD. I got my master's at Washington University in St. Louis and my doctorate at the University of Utah. And it was a distance program. It was their first technology enhanced doctorate. And so I came back to Alaska and was faculty. And it took me 11 years to complete that degree. And I think there was a lot of, during that time, I felt pretty isolated. I felt like writing, one, I didn't ever see myself as a researcher, or, growing up, or even when I started, teaching and things like that, it was just that wasn't something that I saw as a strength in myself. And so even writing felt really lonely. So writing by myself, putting time in, it was really difficult. And it's so funny because Jordan is everybody's mentor, and he was my mentor at that time. And him, and I think Brian Brayboy, and other Indigenous scholars, and really just created, I think the only way that I actually got through my doctorate degree was these communal writing sessions. And I did it in community, and I did it with laughter, and I did it with food, and I did it with, just being able to bounce my ideas off of my friends and my community. And I'm so grateful for that. And I don't see writing as lonely anymore. And that was a big hurdle for me to overcome. I think that, when I first started at the university, And, you know, in my 20s and in my 30s, I was still working on a lot of my own healing, and I still am, and I will continue to. And, you know, so really feeling a lot of imposter syndrome coming into the university, and who am I to be here, and what do I have to offer, and do I know enough, and am I going to say the right thing, and I have to constantly be prepared and be on guard and be ready in case somebody asks me something. And boy, you know, I think that level of angst about being enough is really, really overwhelming and exhausting. And I just would say, you know, to anyone that if I could tell myself something differently now, it was that I was enough. And the fact that I am here is just proof that I am enough. And I don't even have to be here to be enough. But, you know, thinking about in those early days, I think that I struggled with that a lot. And my uncle actually came and talked to me and wanted me to know that he was concerned because in so many of our institutions, we are moving through these systems oftentimes in our head and in our you know, just in our head, and thinking about the future, thinking about our deadlines, thinking about all of the things that we need to get done. And he wanted me to practice moving from my head to my heart every day. And that's, if I could just leave anybody with anything, that is the best advice I really have ever been given in my entire life. Move from your head to your heart, inhabit your body back, take a deep breath, have compassion for yourself and for others. And when I started doing that and practicing that, like my connections with students got better, my connections with colleagues, I felt more empowered, I felt more compassionate for myself, and I felt stronger. And so again, just goes back to, you know, our elders and family, and so many of our traditional and cultural practices teach us about how to you know, do things in a good way and engage in a good way. And so I just learned so much to be able to navigate these challenges today. So I'm grateful. Thank you for the question, Dogadin.
Thank you. That was really powerful. There's some good comments in the chat. I love that, moving from your head to your heart. So I'd like to ask the next question to Dr. Black around obstacles and challenges. And I'm just wondering what opportunities exist for enhancing Indigenous representation and leadership.
Yeah, I'll try to make this brief. So I was thinking, there are so many. I was just looking at this panel and just all the work that you're doing, and I think all of those things really work towards enhancing Indigenous representation and leadership. Each one of you, including you, Tanisha, are leaders in the work that you're doing and the impact that you're making and the lives of those that you work alongside. I would also say that there's something exciting things happening at UAF that I'll just share that really are moving us forward in positive ways, I believe. I mentioned Demumta with all of those fellows. They are all doing amazing work with their communities. And I will just put in a quick stat that 80% of graduates from the School of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences go on to management positions in like federal and state managers of fisheries. And that's leadership, tribal as well. And even if not, like whatever they do, they are leaders. Like I said, they're already. And so that's a good example. We also have the Alaska Native Success Initiative across our campuses, UAF, UAS, and UAA. And that has some large goals, and each campus has, you know, work to institute those in different ways. But one thing that I think is really positive is, you know, yes, bringing Alaska Native students to our universities, but supporting them through the life of their programs to graduate and achieve their goals. And we have some powerful examples that are already working, have been working prior to the ANSI initiative, and that's the Rural Human Services to Human Services to Social Work pipeline. You know, like I said, students are already leaders in their communities and in their wherever they're working, and they have each other in a cohort-based model to support one another. That's where I actually started at UAF, was teaching for the social work cohort, but I also got to co-teach a rural human services class. We also have our tribal governance program, which is certificate and associate's degree, and a lot of those students move on to rural development, Alaska Native Studies bachelor's and master's, and then some go on to an Indigenous Studies PhD. So there are models out there that are really like honoring our Indigenous knowledge and ways of knowing, and helping to create communities and space to be those leaders. And then I was just thinking of you know, speaking life and good words to those who are being brave and doing good work. And Saniguk, I think of our sister, Dr. Charlene Apuk, who is one of, like, I feel like the bravest people I know, because she works in the field of missing and murdered Indigenous peoples. And, you know, it's such a needed area. And I think back on those early warriors who took up those kind of leadership roles. And when there were no positions, they created them to, you know, look at an issue and address it with our people and from a strengths-based perspective, and honor like all of those of our people who are missing MMIP people, and just, I guess, speaking good words into others who are being brave and doing the good work. So thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our next topic for discussion. But before I do, I just want to say thank you for, you know, speaking from your hearts and authentically sharing your experiences navigating this work. And having a social work background offers a unique perspective on problems as we look at the person and the environment. Social work by nature is a helping profession at every level. And I have this I want to read. So according to the National Association of Social Workers, NASW, the profession's primary mission is to enhance human well-being and help meet basic and complex needs of all people. Social workers help relieve people's suffering, fight for social justice, and improve lives and communities. So something that I think is really important for us to hear from you all is not only how you navigate this work in a good way, but how to stay grounded and take care of yourself too. So for the next topic, we'll discuss intersectionality and Indigenous social work. And I want to bring the question to Dr. Ulrich. So with your work around child welfare and with families, you are known for bringing love into social work. Can you elaborate on what that means and why it is important?
Yeah, I just did a webinar in February thinking about and talking about the application of love in our social work practice and how important it is to center that. And that's what I was hearing. I feel like everyone on this panel does that. And that's part of that, setting an intention. And we do this work for love and justice. So to me, these two terms are intertwined. And we're serving our community. We love our people. We love our future generations, our ancestors, the earth. We, you know, it's all from this place of love. And when we come from that place and we know who we are as love, not just, you know, as a verb, but as a noun, that's who we are. It does something, it shifts something. And that's something that happened for me, thankfully, through the research that I've done on connectedness. Once I talked to people and learned what they thought was important for well-being and came to this understanding of, oh my gosh, this is a powerful energy and this is who we are, and we can ignite that within ourselves. And when we do that, what the ripple effect it has, and people feel it, you know. And if you're coming from a place of anger, that's where I have done that in the past. To be honest, I burnt out, you know, like, and it's no wonder, because it's it's an energy too. And there are times when we can and should feel angry. But if that's the sole energy source, then it fizzles. But I feel like love is like, it's a renewable energy source. It's ever flowing, ever present. It's, the purpose and reason of life, so I really turn to look at our civil rights leaders, and our elders, and just hearing so many messages about the importance of love, and that being our guide, our compass. That's what we got to maintain and have centered in all the work that we do. And that's where I feel like we're flipping the script, and we're coming back to being relational human beings. And when we're coming from that loving place, it helps us be in right relationship with ourselves and others. And when we do that, that's where I feel like the justice comes, where we wake up and we say, no more. I'm not going to allow this oppression and all of these hierarchies and all of these, false beliefs that are really harming us and disconnecting us from who we are, as was mentioned about colonization being sort of that doctrination process. Like, no, we're resisting that. We're not letting that happen anymore. That there's a power in making that shift. And that power is a sacred power, as I've read elders speak about. And that sacred power is what is going to turn the tide. I feel like people want this. It makes sense. This is how to be a healthy human being. This is what we need to get back to. I feel like everyone has a familiarity to being Indigenous because it's about being a relational human being, a loving person, and understanding the interconnectedness of everything, and how interdependent we are, and how, we can come together and unite and change the culture and change the norms and change the way that these systems and practices and policies operate. And we can return to being a beloved community, as the late Representative John Lewis called it. And I see that vision clearer every day through the good work that all of you and all of my colleagues are doing. We're doing it. It's not just a thought or idea or theory, it's an action. And so that's the other piece. Like, but read Bell Hooks in her book, It's All About Love. Like, it's an action word, and it's something that I think we're recognizing more and more, and knowing that we have daily practices and habits and those kind of things, interactions, there's an opportunity there to bring love to that space and to make shifts, and powerful shifts, in the way that we address challenges and come up with solutions.
Speaking of powerful shifts, those are really powerful statements that you made. I felt, yeah, that was really special. Thank you for sharing that. I would like to ask Dr. Lewis, so kind of around your work, what strategies can ensure interventions and services are inclusive and relevant to diverse Indigenous populations? And I know you have some experience in this, so please, if you don't mind.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you for that great question. I think it's a question we get asked a lot, probably myself and everyone on this panel. And so I also want to state that, so we think about this work, another question I get asked a lot is, I'm non-native, or I don't work in this community. Are there things I can do to ensure that I'm doing this in a good way? And we don't want to turn away allies. And I think, I always tell people that if you're coming to me with that mindset that you're worried about doing something wrong, you're kind of already going in the right direction. It's those people who just jump right in and do it without caution to the wind that I need to worry about. And the work that I do, so thinking about successful aging work that we've been doing for 17 years and now expanding my work into caregiver interventions, one of the strategies we have I don't think I've developed, but was trained to do, is having advisory committees that consist of the people directly impacted by the work that you're developing. So for our successful aging work, we have elder advisory committees in every community that we partner with. They guide the entire research process. It also helps make sure that we're doing our work in a good way, and that the work that comes out of that research, out of that community, directly reflects the values, the stories, the wisdom they want to have shared with the world. And I feel more confident being able to present, having their approval on things, their last say on what we're presenting. And so also, when you do it that way, they have buy-in, they see the value, they can see themselves in the research. It's wonderful to do a presentation and an elder in the audience recognize their quote being shared, like, oh, I said that and they're using my work. Or, they see the value, they're more invested, but then they also feel like they can take control of the work that comes out of that and use it for their benefit. Or I always believe I got a PhD because I want to have the tools and skills to help communities improve their own health and well-being. Not for the title, not because, I love writing grants or publications, but because I really want to be able to take the skills that I've learned in my program and my research and pass it on to younger people. Every grant I have funding to hire community-based researchers. They do the CITI trainings. They're trained to do interviews. So then afterwards, hopefully they can maybe continue their education, or they learn how to do this research on their own to ask these questions that they want to have asked and answered. And I learned, I think it's been shared earlier, I learned probably more from my community than I learned from reading the literature or working with other scholars in the field, that I walk away from projects more enriched and more appreciative of the work that I do, because I have incredible co-researchers, whether they're undergraduate students who are helping learn, they're doing the interviews with us, or, this intervention work we're doing here in Minnesota, that they're helping us find these peer mentors, to the elders who are these peer mentors or who have been dementia caregivers for 30 years and have this wealth of knowledge that they're willing to share. That to me are the blessings that come out of this research. And so that's one strategy, right? Is making sure that people who are impacted or benefit, I don't like the word impacting, but benefited from this research are directly involved in every aspect. The other one I would really like to emphasize is being a community member first. It was shocking. This is not funny, but some of our research team members haven't been to the community, and we tout ourselves as a community-based research center. And so it's shocking to some people that say that we have people that have never been there, but they would talk about dissemination. And so I said, I go to community without the research hat on for the first 2 or 3 visits. I'm just there to be in the community, go to the grocery store, go to a basketball game, go to the powwow, build those relationships, be seen as a person first, and then the research comes later. So building that trust, those special relationships, the rapport that's needed to be successful, and to build that trust that hopefully goes beyond the grant funding. So I would say those are the 2 big ones. Engage those who are benefiting or using the research, and then be in the community as a community member first, and then do your research.
Awesome. That was amazing. So we are going to wrap up our panel discussion today with one more set of questions. Thank you to everybody that has been making comment or in the chat, and to our panelists. So I want to end in a good way. And I'm just curious about the future directions and best practices for research, for any future emerging scholars, for allies that want to support this work. I'm just wondering what your dreams are for the future. How do you see those dreams already being integrated into this field? And if there's any last minute things that you didn't get a chance to say, this is your chance to now. Dr. Dementa, would you like to start us off?
Yes, I would just say that I hope that, as you engage in research, that it transforms you. And I think about the work that we're doing with the elders, and it is it is unbelievable sometimes that we get to do this work with them. And what I love is that they're teaching us so much about um, you know, how to be in a good way. And I think that a couple of things that I've learned from them is to really, really focus down on anything that we do in the future that has to do with Indigenous people. I think having engaging discussions about our values and what that looks like in action helps people. And one of the elders said, don't just put the values poster on the wall, make sure to talk about it, have conversations, tell stories, and engage people in that, because again, our actions flow from those, right? From those values and intentions. So the other thing that I really feel like that they've taught me is that this is my word for this year is pivot, right? That we can adapt and be flexible and change when need to. And when, you know, the elders in the community are guiding you, that you can shift when needed, and we don't have to be stuck in that place of rigidity. And I know that can be challenging with funding sources and different things. And I think what we've really been blessed with in working with the elders is having we are funded by the Center for Indigenous Innovation and Health Equity, who is also funded by the Office of Minority Health. And the director of that is Valerie Bluebird Jernigan. And so we don't have to, she's Indigenous, we don't always have to explain why we needed to shift and pivot. And I think that has been amazing. I think pivoting, I think being flexible is so important. Also, just that we can, you know, as we're engaged in that, we can be just transformed, right? And so it's the love, it's the laughter, it's the food, it's being on the land, it's learning from each other, it's growing, and wow, that is amazing just to be a part of. So don't be dead.
Thank you. Dr. Black, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I guess I guess I'll just speak to all of the students listening and anyone who listens to this in the future. Is just that you belong here at UAF, at UAA, at UAS, at any school that you're attending, and that you have so much to offer and share, you know, if you want to, and the world really needs that. And I was thinking about, there was a webinar called Beyond Land Acknowledgements, and I was on a panel, but what really resonates with me is that Dr. Charlene Stern, she's my boss, she's the vice chancellor for the College of Rural and Community Development. She said something, and I'm not going to be as eloquent as she was, but she basically said that, you know, institutions often pathologize Indigenous students, that, you know, they show up underprepared or like don't have the resources or like X, Y, and Z. And she said, you know, basically, like, what are we doing as institutions to really reflect on, you know, the ways in which we're teaching and supporting and, you know, meeting the students where they're at. And so many words. And like I said, she said it so beautifully. And I really reflect on that, is like, our students have so many gifts and are amazing, and like, you all belong here, and we were all students once. And my dream is that you just know that you belong here, and we need you to make this work better and stronger. And I think about Tanisha and all of the work she's done on elders, mentoring elders, and she's really a leader in that project. And often Laverne and I are like, what do you think? And she's really making it so much stronger. And so I guess that's my dream, is that you know just how amazing you are, and that like we all benefit from, you know, you engaged in the research and in our courses and in these spaces, and we are so honored to learn from you. Thank you.
Sine, thank you. Dr. Jordan Lewis, would you like to go next, sharing any, what are your dreams for the future, or how do you see those dreams already being integrated into the field? And any last thoughts you were thinking throughout this panel that you didn't get to share? Now's your chance.
Yeah, thank you. So my first thought is I wish this panel would have existed 20 years ago when I was taking my first stats class with Janice Reynolds at UAF and knew there were other ways to think about research other than statistics. My dream, I think, is a few different things I was jotting down as I was thinking about this really rich conversation, is this idea of having a safe space, right? This idea that we all come in, and I think maybe that safe space, not the right word, but an equal playing field, right? Whether you're an elder or you're in high school or you're in grade school, we all are scientists at some level, right? We all have inquisitive minds and questions we ask from childhood until we pass on. And this idea that you have a PhD or you don't, that we all come to the table with the same amount of knowledge and titles don't matter, and that we are all valued for the life experiences. And I think that comes from, working with elders, this idea that unfortunately, the Western institutions and the funders we work with, PhDs, carry a lot of weight. And this idea that, we go in, people listen to us, we have authority, when the elders next to me are looked over. And I think that's really unfortunate. And my dream would be those elders are asked first, if we're at an NIH funding meeting, right? That they're the ones that go to for guidance. And then the PhDs can talk, because we come in with the literature and the background and the skills and a specific skill set that we have. And the students who are on here now, the students who listen to this, we listen to it again in the future, that, we're all standing on the shoulders of our elders. We are here because the people who have paved the way, researchers or not, we've all are following in the footsteps of people who've done incredible work. And so I encourage all of us and the people who are listening now, future students today, push these boundaries, ask those questions. Dr. Ulrich made great examples of, like, raise your hand in class. Why are we not there? NIH says the same thing. I was on the board of the director's board for NIH several years ago, and AIAN data is not presented annually because we're too small. It's insignificant. Why is that happening? So I think push those boundaries, get rid of these differences that exist between titles and degrees and backgrounds and experiences, and that we're all one group of people that have this experiences that we can share and move forward. Because I think we all have this passion and desire to see everyone succeed. So that's my dream.
I love it. I'm already feeling so inspired and excited. Dr. Ulrich, is there anything you'd like to add to this future?
Yeah. The future is Indigenous. Down with capitalism, down with racism, down with all these isms, and let's come back to being, whole relational human beings again, and coming together as community. And that's where I feel like the hope, and I see this occurring more and more, where there's an honoring of the local Indigenous brilliance that exists, and we need to do that everywhere. We need to be connecting with Indigenous communities all across the world, and make sure that they're guiding, and we're listening, and we're honoring the wisdom that they have, the brilliance they have from their ancestors, in terms of how to be in right relationship in it. So my vision, my hope and dream is we have a healthy earth. We have the fish running through the rivers. We have children who know how to speak their language and sing the songs and dance the dances, and all of the things that we've had the privilege of reviving and passing down to our young ones. And, that's where we're all here for a reason. We're all doing the good work, whether you have a PhD behind your name or MSW or degree, whatever, like what Jordan was saying, we all matter. We all have gifts to share. Everyone in our community is, to me, in my opinion, a researcher. Like, we all have had to go through this whole life developmental process, and we've had to go through things and learn from things, and that's life. you know, and that's what I heard you share, Jessica, when you were saying, you know, it's a never-ending process. We're always learning. And so I'm very hopeful, and that's where I even heard Linda Tehue Smith say that before, is that's just one of our enduring qualities, I think, as Indigenous people, is that we always have that hope for a better future, for a healthy future, a healthy community, and we're doing what we can to bring that back. And I'm so grateful for all of you and all the good work happening across Alaska to help our children, our families, our communities, our future generations, our ancestors be who we are as healthy, wonderful, beautiful, brilliant people.
Wow. I just had to take a moment because it's so amazing. I really believe that we can make the world a better place, and we can take all the knowledge from thousands and thousands of years that's been passed down to all of us. I also want to acknowledge the diversity in this group. We have, I'm Upper Tanana Athabascan, Jessica's Gwich'in, Laverne is Degatan, Dr. Ulrich is Inupiaq, and Dr. Jordan Lewis is Aleut. So just all the wisdom that's been passed down to us in this one panel is so, so special. I do want to open up the floor to any questions. We only have a few minutes. Before I do, I just want to share a link, if you don't mind, for any of the attendees to give me some feedback. I am doing this as part of my capstone project and would love to hear from all of you. So if you don't mind filling that out, that would help me out a lot. This meeting will be recorded, or it is recorded and will be available. I'm not sure where it will be yet, but it will be under UAA social work, most likely on YouTube, but I'm still figuring that out. I do have a question in the chat if any of the panelists would like to answer it. It says, do you have any advice for a current social work student wanting to go into research? Also, where can we find your work and writings?
I can go first. Yeah, I would definitely be, I can share my email and we can send articles to you, Tanisha, maybe, and have them available for people if they're interested in reaching out and getting a few of our publications. All from my publications, I don't want to speak for everyone, but advice I would say is find someone who does research you're interested in or works in an area you're interested in, kind of learn about how they got into it. I think this is an excellent opportunity to kind of learn what our journey has been like. But if there's, if someone does work that you're really excited about, and I would be happy to help make connections. I know what it's like to kind of cold call or cold email people, or like big people in their field. I still get, like that starstruck by some researchers, like, oh, I don't want to talk to them, but I'd be happy to help make those connections or, help create that network. But yeah, find someone that you like the work that they're doing. I would hope that they would be open to having a chat with students, talk to them, what their journey was like, how to get into research. Yeah, that's one I can think of at the moment.
I'll share that. Look for internships, contact people if you are interested in research, that we always have projects and would love to bring in students and have you join our work and see if it's something you want to do and pursue and potentially take on in your own professional career down the road. So that's always a good way to test the waters first.
All right. Well, is 6:29. Panelists, is there any last minute thoughts that you'd like to share before we end? Okay, well, I'd like to end on time. Thank you, everybody who attended, and especially to our panelists. This has been such an incredible conversation. I feel richer for it. And have a great night, everybody.
Gitten, Tanisha.
Yes, my feet showed, Tanisha. Great job.
Yeah, thank you. Excellent.
Wow.
All right. Good night, everybody. Enjoy your Monday evening.